All right, so now we are going on to part 3 of your test, and we are going to, I'm going to write up here, part 3, okay? Part 3, and this is part A, which is your documents, okay? Document-based questions, short answer questions to go along with your document-based essay, okay? You're going to use the analysis, whatever you come up with from these documents to help you write your essay. It's actually really easy to do. It's really easy to not do as well. So I'm hoping that you put some effort towards this and you use everything that they're giving you to help you be successful, because a lot of times they give you a lot of answers in here. Okay, so first one we have here is a map. Okay, it says directions. Analyze the documents and answer the short answer questions that follow each document in the space provided. So we have on this page document 1A, which is a map, and document 1B, which is a blurb of text. Okay, what I tell all of my students, and if you are in my class, you have heard me say it over and over and over again, R, T, Q, F. Read the question first. When you are given anything, when you are given a map, when you are given a blurb of text, when you are given an ad, when you are given anything in front of you, read the question first. Find out what they're looking for, so you are not wasting your time reading through all of this. This isn't that big. It's not that bad. It's not that big of a blurb of text. Sometimes they give you a full page. You don't want to waste your time reading this and then reading the question and then going back and trying to figure out, you have to read it all over again, trying to figure out where to find the information. It's silly. Read the question first. Look at what they give you, or what they're asking you rather, and then look at the documents they give you, find the information. Okay? Work smart, not hard. You're going to hear me say that a lot too, almost as much as RTQF. Okay, so we're going to read our question first. Based on these documents, what are 2 problems faced by President Abraham Lincoln in 1861? This has already given us information that we need. One of the options on our essay, which I can actually go back to, I know it was a different video, but hopefully you watched it and you know what I'm talking about. So, Abraham Lincoln, suspension of habeas corpus. Well, if you don't know what habeas corpus is, that's okay. The documents might give you the answer, okay? Documents give you a lot of answers. So, we know that we're talking about the first part, Abraham Lincoln, okay? And problems that he faced, you need 2 of them, in 1861. So, the next step is, after reading the question, after reading your directions and then the question, circle your sources. Ooh, I was about to circle my source and then my page skipped. I'm going to circle my source here. I'm going to circle my source here and see if it gives me any information. Okay? Sometimes you can get an answer right out of the source. Not a lot, but at least you know where it came from. Okay? So this map, the source is Kennedy and Bailey, editors, The American Spirit, Volume 1 to 1877. Houghton Mifflin, 2002. This is a map. It's actually a pretty good map from a textbook. So if you were in my class, you would never see this because we don't use textbooks. But decent map anyway. Okay. Source number 2, James M. McPherson, This Mighty Scourge, Perspectives on the Civil War, Oxford University Press, 2007. This is from a book. This guy wrote a book. It was put out in 2007. Okay? All right, so it doesn't really tell us much. All right, let's go through document 1A. If I already have a framework now. I have a framework from the question that I know that President Abraham Lincoln is in charge, okay? It's 1861. What's a problem that he's facing? Well, let's look at our map. First thing you do when you look at a map is look for any kind of identifying information. Titles, dates, there's lots of those on here. Titles, dates, the key, a legend, something that will give you information about what you're actually looking at, okay? So, seceding states with dates in order of secession. Okay. If I didn't know what secession was, hopefully you do. If I didn't know, I could read this and maybe find a little bit more information, okay? Seceding states with dates in order of secession. This stuff over here, it was important enough to put it on the map. I'm assuming it's important. I'm going to do an overview of this map. I'm going to go, well, I know that the United States does not look like this, okay? I know there are not big gaps in between states. States are butted right up against each other like a jigsaw puzzle, okay? So the fact that they blew up this map has to mean something. Oh, hey, look. I should draw little stars here. I should add sparkles to my video. Okay, so these states up here, there's an arrow going to them. These states up here, Missouri, Kentucky, West Virginia, Maryland, and Delaware, are border states which did not secede. Border states which did not secede. Well, what's above them? With a time period? Well, we always link Abraham Lincoln to slavery, to the Civil War. Okay, so this is showing us the North. Well, it's not showing us the North. It's showing us the border states that did not secede from the Union. And so this is showing us the South. We've got Florida, we've got Texas. Those are the two big ones that everybody knows. Then a whole bunch of little ones in the middle that no one ever remembers. Okay, so the middle one here says seceded after the attack on Fort Sumter. So that's these ones. Arkansas, Tennessee, North Carolina, and Virginia. And then, oh, I'm noticing there's numbers on here as well. I wonder if that's the order in which they, oh yeah, and order of secession. And then the ones down here were ones that seceded before the attack on Fort Sumter. So even if you didn't really know, you weren't great with your timeline, you could figure this out, okay? This is states that seceded from the Union, and we're talking about the Civil War time period, you know, around then. And you can tell by the dates here, it gives you, and actually they're in order. South Carolina, number 1, December 1860. 2, Mississippi. 3, Florida. 4, Alabama. 5, Georgia. 6, Louisiana. 7, Texas. Okay? In the order of secession, in the order which they chose to leave the Union. And I'm sure you know some background there about, you know, keeping their slaves and all that stuff. But it's not important right now, okay? So could we get an answer out of here? What are two problems that President Abraham Lincoln faced in 1861? Well, let's see, 1860, 1861, 61, 61, 61. Well, one problem that you could write down before even going into this blurb of text down here was that states were seceding from the Union, okay? So I would write that. States were seceding from the Union. Okay. And these are both worth 1 point. So if I saw that on somebody's test, I would give that a point. Okay, so we're going to get our highlighter. We're going to look at the next section, document 1B. Remember, we're looking for two problems that faced President Abraham Lincoln in 1861. Let's see. After a mob in Baltimore attacked the 6th Massachusetts Infantry as it passed through the city on its way to defend Washington in April 1861, other Confederate sympathizers in Maryland tore down telegraph wires and burned railroad bridges linking the capital to the outside world. That sounds important to me, so I'm going to highlight it. Okay? Confederate sympathizers in Maryland tore down telephone wires and burned down railroad bridges linking the capital to the outside world. Okay? Is that a big deal? Absolutely. In response, Lincoln suspended the writ of habeas corpus. Now, if you didn't know what habeas corpus was when you first read that question, here it is. Look at this. They gave you the answer. If you didn't know what habeas corpus was, you would read this and go, the writ of, actually, let's add the whole thing. The writ of habeas corpus means protection against unlawful detention. You are given the right, the protection that you won't just get picked up and thrown in jail for anything that anyone sees fit. They actually have to have evidence against you. Well, Lincoln suspended that, and basically anyone who was found or was thought to be a sympathizer, was thought to be causing problems, they could just be thrown in jail. Okay, so let's keep reading. Between Philadelphia and Washington, I'm going to go back to yellow. Between Philadelphia and Washington, subsequent presidential orders expanded the areas where the writ was suspended until a proclamation of September 24th, 1862, suspended it throughout the whole country, north as well as south. And for good measure, authorized martial law and trials by military court of, in quotes, all rebels and insurgents, their aiders and abettors, which means supporters, and all persons discouraging volunteer enlistments, resisting militia drafts, or guilty of any disloyal practice, affording aid and comfort to rebels against the authority of the United States. Okay, so we've got people now who, if you're showing any kind of support for people who are keeping troops from being drafted, from people enlisting in the army, if you are showing any kind of resistance whatsoever, they can throw you in jail. Okay, so we're going to go back, although this is why, I'm going to point this out to you. This is why it's important to read these, okay? I understand you see a blurb of text, you're like, oh God, I've already read so much today. I can't. I'm just going to write down anything. This is why it's important. They're giving you an answer. They're giving you the answer. If you didn't know what habeas corpus was, now you do. Okay? And now maybe you can answer that question a little bit better. You can finish up your essay. You can use your documents to help you. Okay? So anyway, I'm going to go back. Sorry, I know I get off on these tangents, but I really want you guys to be successful. Okay? So I would say what I have in yellow here would be another problem that was faced by Abraham Lincoln. Confederate sympathizers, excuse my writing, in Maryland, and D, I'm just going to put, tore down telegraph wires and burned bridges. I'll finish it up, railroad bridges. I ran out of room because I write too big. Are those both problems that Abraham Lincoln was facing in 1861? Yes, they were. So you would get full points on this, 1 point each for those, okay? All right, let's go on to the next one. All right, so we're going on to document 2A. There are no directions just for this one, so we can get right to work. Okay, so document 2A, on May 16th, 1863, the Democratic Committee of Albany, New York, adopted several resolutions denouncing alleged abuses of the Constitution by President Abraham Lincoln. Document 2A is an excerpt from the President's letter responding to their criticism about the suspension of habeas corpus. Okay, so we know we're still on Lincoln, still dealing with the suspension of habeas corpus. Let's take a look at what we do first, okay? Let's RTQF. Sorry, didn't mean to expose you to my horrible singing, but I actually wasn't using my pen on that one. Had to spell it out with the mouse. Okay, so based on these documents, what was one argument used to support the suspension of the writ of habeas corpus? Okay, so we are looking for support the suspension of habeas corpus. So they're in support of blocking habeas corpus, and arresting people who are causing problems. Okay? All right. So an argument to support. All right. So let's take a look. Of course, President Lincoln's going to be in support because he was the president and he actually put it through, right? So it says, ours is a case of rebellion. Oh, I'm sorry. I was jumping ahead. We need to circle our sources. My goodness. See? Teachers forget to. All right. Here's our sources. We have 2 blurbs of text here. We read our question. We're going to look at our sources. The source is President Abraham Lincoln, The Truth from an Honest Man, The Letter of the President, 1863. So this is 2 years after, right? We're dealing with 1861 on the other page. The source for the second document is Frank J. Williams, When Albany Challenged the President, New York Archives, Winter 2009. That sounds like an article that was published in 2009 talking about what had happened. Okay? So we have primary and secondary source. Okay? So, back to Abe. Ours is a case of rebellion, so called by the resolutions before me. In fact, a clear, flagrant, and gigantic case of rebellion. And the provision of the Constitution that, quotes, the privilege of the writ of habeas corpus shall not be suspended unless when, in cases of rebellion or invasion, the public safety may require it, is the provision which specifically applies to our present case. So we know that the president is going to be for this, right? He's in support of suspension of habeas corpus because, and he cites the Constitution. Provision in the Constitution okay, that is one argument to support it, right? The Constitution says so. Constitution says when there's a case of rebellion and the public safety requires it, we can suspend habeas corpus. Okay? So we already have one, but let's take a look in here because remember on the last document that we looked at, the last page, document 1B, I think it was, it actually ended up giving us an answer. It told us if we didn't know what the writ of habeas corpus was, it gave us the answer. So let's take a look because there might be something in here that we might be able to use, okay, to write our essay at the end of all this, okay? So remember, this is a secondary document. This is a guy who was not there because it was written in 2009, right? But he's writing about what was going on at the time. In Lincoln's opinion, the framers of the Constitution had been wise to include a provision allowing for the suspension of the writ of habeas corpus, which was necessary to prevent sudden and extensive uprisings against the government. Lincoln explained to the Albany Democrats that Vallandigham, this guy has quite a name, Vallandigham, he was the former Ohio congressman, his name was Clement Vallandigham, arrest was not, as they mistakenly believed, premised on his criticism of the administration. So this man right here, was arrested, right? And the Democrats, the Albany Democrats, were saying that they thought that it was because he criticized the administration. The Democrats had charged the administration with arresting Vallandigham in an effort to silence him, and the Atlas and Argus had opined, which means expressed the opinion, that the arrest is a threat against every public man who refuses to advocate the extreme measures of the abolition cabinet. So, abolition cabinet, the government was trying to put an end to slavery, right? And that's one of the main causes of the Civil War, which is this time period, okay? So they were worried that anyone who didn't agree with them was going to get arrested, and that's what was happening here. But Lincoln declared that Vallandigham had been arrested for his avowed hostility to the Union's war efforts, his laboring to prevent the raising of troops. Remember, that's what we said in the first one. That was one of the reasons. And his encouragement of desertions of the army. Furthermore, Vallandigham's efforts aimed at damaging the army and leaving the Union without an adequate military force to support the rebellion were intolerable to the administration and antithetical, which means opposed, to the Union's attempt to preserve the nation. Lincoln explained that experience showed that armies could not be maintained unless those who deserted were punished by death. He believed that Vallandigham's efforts to encourage desertions were equally detrimental to the nation and should be likewise punished by death. Ooh. Okay, one argument used to support. Let's see. Lincoln explained, and he believed that this guy should be killed. That's what he thought. Then came the most remembered passage of Lincoln's reply. Must I shoot a simple-minded soldier boy who deserts, while I must not touch a hair of the wily agitator who induces him to desert? I think that in such a case to silence the agitator and save the boy is not only constitutional, but withal a great mercy. Okay, so how are we going to break this down? We're looking for one argument to support the suspension of the writ of habeas corpus. Okay, I think that this is a good blurb. We might actually use that later on. But what was an argument that was used to support the suspension of habeas corpus? There's several in here. You can choose one of these. I personally would go for the Constitution. Provision in the Constitution. It's an argument that people are using to support the suspension of the writ of habeas corpus, right? So let's see. The provision, of the Constitution I'm going to write it word for word. That the writ. We spell habeas corpus wrong. Let's see if I can find it on here, because I always spell it wrong. I don't want to spell it wrong on a video. Habeas. Provision that constitutes writ of habeas corpus could be suspended or what? Public safety. In cases of rebellion or invasion. Do you have to write all this? No, you don't. But I'm giving you a full answer, and mine, honestly, you probably could have gotten this to fit on 2 lines. I'm writing on a touchpad screen here, and it's coming out really huge. So the provision of the Constitution that the writ of habeas corpus could be suspended for public safety in cases of rebellion or invasion. Okay? Could you have used some of these other things where, like this, silence the agitator? It's a great mercy instead of killing, a boy who was brought to agitation by somebody. Sure, if you wanted to put that in your own words, or you wanted to cite something right out of this text, that would be fine. I think that is this one right here is probably the most straightforward, and it came right from Lincoln, and it came right from the Constitution. Okay? All right, let's take a look at what we have next. 3 is just a blurb of text. 3A and 3B, blurb of text. Now, because they have these split up with a question after each, let's treat them as separate documents, even though they're listed 3A and 3B. Okay? Looks like we're still on Abraham Lincoln. So let's circle our source. Chief Justice Roger B. Taney, ex parte Merryman, May 1861. Okay? Question that we're going to answer just with this blurb of text right here is, according to this document, why does Chief Justice Roger Taney think President Abraham Lincoln does not have the right to suspend habeas corpus? I want you to think back really quickly to the initial essay where they were telling you what they were going to ask you for in the essay when you get to it after the documents. They want one argument for the suspension of habeas corpus, and they want one argument against, right? We've already figured out the for, and now we're going to go against it. Okay, so an argument where they don't think that the president has the right to suspend the writ of habeas corpus. Okay, you could use these as your essay. This could be half of your essay. We've already done it. All you need to do is explain what was going on, and you already know what's going on. Abraham Lincoln, slavery, Civil War, right? Mention those things, you're going to get full points. Okay, so let's look at this. Why does Chief Justice Roger Taney think that Abraham Lincoln does not have the right to suspend habeas corpus? Okay, so it says, the clause of the Constitution which authorizes the suspension of the privilege of the writ of habeas corpus is in the 9th section of the first article. This article is devoted to the legislative department of the United States. Think about it. Hopefully you know your branches of government. The legislative is not, well, the president is the executive branch, right? So legislative is separate. So what he's saying is the legislative branch should be handling this, right? And has not the slightest reference to the executive department. It begins by providing that all legislative powers therein granted shall be vested in a Congress of the United States, which shall consist of a Senate and House of Representatives. And after prescribing the manner in which these two branches of the legislative department shall be chosen, it proceeds to enumerate specifically the legislative powers which it thereby grants, and it says in parentheses after it, and legislative powers which it expressly prohibits. And at the conclusion of this specification, a clause is inserted giving Congress the power to make all laws which shall be necessary and proper for carrying into execution the foregoing powers and all other powers vested by its Constitution, by this Constitution of the government of the United States, or in any department or office thereof. Okay, that is a lot of text. That is a lot of big words, a lot of words that are put together in a strange way because it was written a very long time ago. So, what are we going to pull out of this? Why did Chief Justice Roger Taney think that Abraham Lincoln did not have the right to suspend habeas corpus? Well, hopefully you heard in here, I did kind of point it out a little bit, that he's talking about the article where that Abraham Lincoln was citing, right? The 9th section of the first article. This article is devoted to the legislative department of the United States and has not the slightest reference to the executive department. So how can we put that in our own words? Well, he believes that, and let me highlight this too, legislative is the Senate and the House, right? Senate and the House. Not the executive branch, which is the president. So because the president is suspending the writ of habeas corpus, he thinks that he doesn't have the right to because this is, oh, you know what? Let me make it into a full sentence. Okay, where's my eraser? Let's just back up. There we go. The suspension of habeas corpus is the responsibility of the legislative branch, right? He's saying that the president has no right. I don't know why it just did that, but he's saying the president has no right because the Constitution, even though the president's citing the Constitution, says Constitution doesn't give you that right. It only talks about the legislative branch, not the executive. Okay? All right, so okay. So here's our document 3B. Let's circle our source. Let's read the question first. Okay. According to James McPherson, what is one argument used by those who opposed the suspension of habeas corpus by President Lincoln? Okay. So this is James McPherson. So who's James McPherson? Well, if we look at our source, we'll find out. Source, James M. McPherson, Tried by War, Abraham Lincoln as Commander-in-Chief, Penguin Press, 2008. It's a book that was written by James McPherson. So according to James McPherson, what is one argument used by those who opposed the suspension of habeas corpus? They didn't think that President Lincoln had the right to do it. So let's find an argument that could be used by those who are opposed. These actions were contentious, which means controversial at the time. The suspension of habeas corpus and the creation of military courts, if not the Emancipation Proclamation, remain controversial among historians today. Lincoln's use of these war powers established precedents invoked by subsequent presidents in wartime. Whether they were constitutional or necessary in the 1860s or in later wars remains a matter of dispute. In the Milligan case of 1866, the U.S. Supreme Court declared unconstitutional the trial of civilians by military courts in areas where the civil courts are open. So if you have your civil courts and they're still operating, there's no reason to use military courts, is what he's saying. And some of the Lincoln administration's actions, such as the arrest of Maryland legislators and other officials in September 1861, seem excessive and unjustified by any reasonable military necessity. Some of Lincoln's, like the arrest of Maryland, seem excessive and unjustified. Okay, so excessive, so we could say that one argument used by those who were opposed was that they were excessive and unjustified by any reasonable military necessity. They could also say, like I pointed out, this one, I like this one, I think. Constitutional, yeah, let's use the last one. I like this one, but because it's an 1866 Supreme Court, I don't know. Let's use the last one. Some of the Lincoln administration's actions, such as the arrest of Maryland legislators in September 1861 seemed excessive and unjustified. Boop. Okay, so are there a couple other things in here you could use? Yes, absolutely. This is probably the most straightforward one, and it's easy to flip around and put into, or to quote directly and put into your essay. Okay, some of the Lincoln administration's actions, such as the arrest of Maryland legislators in September 1861, seemed excessive and unjustified. So they thought that the administration was doing things that were completely unjustified and could not be backed up by the Constitution. Okay, I think we're going to end this one for now. We're at 35 minutes. That's a long time. Okay, so is it going to take you this long to go through your documents? No, probably not. It's not. I'm really dragging this out and really trying to show you guys how to break these down. I know that the language is kind of, I don't know, kind of rough in some of these. Like, we don't speak like this anymore. So some of these are kind of hard to understand. So I'm trying to break them down for you to try to help you out with, you know, really getting a good answer out of them. Okay, so I'm going to end this for now, and we will go on to document 4 and beyond in the next video. Okay, bye-bye.